Hey everybody, this is Dream, and today we have a nice, big 11-game Major League Baseball slate. Before I get started, you can guys smash that like and subscribe button. It really helps the channel a lot. I really do appreciate it. Make sure to check the description and links below for Discord and for YouTube memberships. Really do appreciate you guys in both places. So let's go ahead and get this thing started. This does feature a big slate here. We only have really one game that has some weather issues potentially, which is the Mets Atlanta game. So to keep that in mind, I do think that carries a little bit of risk, but not a whole lot today. Not only that, but the pitching in that game is probably pretty avoidable. So for the most part, at least, so I think it's probably a game that you can focus on hitters anyway, so it doesn't matter too much. With that said, let's get into our pitching. So pitching today is pretty interesting. We have four good plays, and then we have a whole bunch of GPP type plays on this slate, and then we have a couple extreme options as well, but they are top to bottom, so they've done the pricing pretty right today. We'll start with Glass now. He is the top overall play on the slate. He does look like he's in a really solid situation against Minnesota, a team who tends to strike out a lot, so he definitely has really good upside here. He's got the highest strikeout rate on the slate, and that gives him a lot of utility to be a solid player for the slate. He's going to be hard to roster at this price point, but I do think he's viable. He's also started the season fairly well with two 20-plus fantasy point games. Obviously, we need him to do a little bit better than that on this one, but I think he has that capability today. Looking at Zach Wheeler, Wheeler's the top alternate to him. He has started the season extremely well himself against Atlanta and Cincinnati, so that gives him some upside here against St. Louis. He has played very well against St. Louis in the past. Last season, he had a game where he scored 35 fantasy points, and I would like to see him get a similar type of game. He just needs his strikeout rate for this game is pretty solid as well, and he started the season pretty well. So I think he's in a great spot here. St. Louis does have some bats, but I think that Wheeler is going to be good enough to not allow those bats to do much today. The next guy I'm going to look at here is Evoli for Texas. Now he's facing Oakland. Now Oakland has had some good games this season, but Evoli's played very well so far, at least against the Tampa Bay Rays, and he's got some good strikeout rate for this game. He's also been solid against Oakland in the past. Last season he had a game of 45 fantasy point. However, he did have an 8 fantasy point game too, so that is a little bit of a concern, but he's a good pitcher and he's got some good upside in this matchup, and so he's definitely worth a look, especially since the last game he played very well. Sonny Gray is going to likely play today. It'll be his first game uh, uh, after having after not doing any minor league starts. I do think he's a viable option today, though he definitely carries some risk. But he is facing a team that does have a lot of strikeout potential, and that gives him some upside. He also faced Philadelphia last season and averaged 27 and scored 27 fantasy points against them, so he has some upside from that perspective. He's kind of a contrarian play, kind of almost a GPP play at this point, but I do think he's a good play, assuming he's fully healthy and good to go here. He definitely carries a little bit of risk, being the fact he's coming back from injury and hadn't played much. Then when we get to the next guys, we got Kelly, Javier, Reagans, Bassett, Lopez, and Rodon. All of these guys are going to be GPP only plays, and so let's go ahead and just talk about each guy individually here. So we'll start with Kelly. Kelly has a bit too, he's got a rough situation here in Colorado. However, he dominated Colorado to start the season, and if we look at his history, last year he played them 3 times, and he scored over 27 fantasy points in all three, including 2 games in Colorado. Uh, that definitely gives him a lot of upside. Now, I do think Colorado's hitting the ball pretty well right now in Colorado, so that is a little bit of a concern. But he's been absolutely dominating Colorado this last season, so he is squarely a GPP play because of where they're playing the game. But he definitely has the ability to hold them down some. Javier did not play yesterday, and so now he's on the docket to play today. I assume that he's fine, and they just want to spot start other guy, but maybe need some more information on him, but he does have good strikeout rate for this game. Kansas City is playing well, though, so I do like some Kansas City bats on this one, I think. But he definitely has some potential to be a solid play on the slate, so he's definitely worth a look. Reagans for Kansas City, alternatively, it's really a GPP play against a really tough team to roster a guy against, but he has shown some evidence that he can do okay in this situation, and he's got a good strikeout rate for it. He's also started the season pretty well, and so that gives him some upside here. Bassett is somebody who I typically like. He has started the season very rough, but he does have a good matchup here against Seattle, which maybe could be a bounce back potential situation for him. He has one of the better earned run expected on the slate. Now his strikeout rate is a little bit to be desired, as he has started the season pretty rough from that perspective as well. But hopefully he can bounce up here and have a really solid game and be a good play. I could definitely see him being a guy that if he does well, that he could end up being on a top lineup type situation. Uh, Ronaldo Lopez is also interesting for the Braves. Now, the Mets have struggled so far this season, but they did well yesterday. But Lopez has started the season pretty well against the White Sox. He has a decent strikeout rate for this game, and he has some potential. So I do like him here, but he definitely carries a lot of risk. And then Rodon, I think he's going to be a popular play today, even though because his price point and his potential, as he does have a lot of strikeout upside, and he is facing Miami, who isn't the best hitting team by a stretch. So he definitely has some upside here. He also started the season against two really good teams, so now he's going to get a little bit of a breather against Miami. Hopefully he can do well in this one. I do think he has a lot of potential here, and he looks like a type of guy that's going to have a lot of usage as a result of this situation. So moving into our catchers now. Oh, sorry, I meant to say I have two guys that are kind of Hail Mary GPPs, and that's Civil and Harrison for Tampa Bay and San Francisco, respectively. They're both in good situations, but they have struggled so far to start the season. So uh, moving into our catchers, we're going to start here at in Arizona, obviously, with Marino. Marino has been really rough to start the season, but he's been a popular look day to day because of the situations he's in. Being in Colorado, he definitely gets some upside here, but he has struggled to hit the ball so far with just a couple hits in the season, only 4 hits so far this season. So though he doesn't strike out much, and so he is due for a solid game, I do think this is a situation where he can definitely take care of business. And in the first series of the season, he actually had his best game in the game one, where he had a couple RBIs. And so I like him here, and he definitely draws some good metrics for this game. But Garver is another guy that you can look at this position here for Seattle. Now he does have better home run potential at the slate than anybody else at the price point at this position. He's also cheap, so that definitely gives him some upside. He's not somebody that you have to avoid, but he definitely has a little bit of harder time with the strikeouts than Mariano does, and so he's definitely a contrarian play off him. And then Yanir Diaz for Houston, also interesting today. He's hit the ball a lot better than the other two, but the situation is not quite as good for him as it is for Moreno, so I do think he's a contrarian off of him. But that said, these three are the top options, so they definitely look decent here. I would also look at Jonah Heim for Texas, and then Shea Langolays for Oakland, and uh, Contreras for St. Louis, Raleigh for Seattle, and O'Hope from the LA Angels. So moving into our first baseman, we'll start with Randy Diaz, who I just so happen to have popped up here. He's got the best metrics on the slate. He's got a lot of home run upside here. He's got a lot of good hitting upside in this game, and this is a popular situation for him. I don't see how he doesn't have a good game here. He is very expensive, so he's going to be hard to roster, but his metrics pop off the chart today better than Otani's does. So that gives me a lot of prop to utilize him on the slate, especially against Sandoval, who's a weak pitcher. Looking at the other options here, Otani obviously could play at this position as well, though he doesn't have the same upside that Diaz has, and Diaz is cheaper, and so I do think that Otani's a really good fade today. Looking at some other guys that are a little priced down a little bit, Vlad Jr. is going to be interesting as he's got a pretty good, tougher matchup here, but he definitely has some potential for a home run today, and so I do like him as kind of a one-off option. Oopsie. Then we'll look at Wade Jr. Wade Jr. here for San Francisco. Now he does have a good matchup, and he did have a good multi-hit game yesterday. He definitely doesn't have that super high upside fantasy wise, but he can get you some points, and he's cheap enough that he's definitely worth a look. He can also play in the outfield as well, and that definitely gives him some potential here. Then we'll also look at Jake Berger from Miami, who can also play at third base. Now, Berger has been pretty solid to start the season. Now, he's had some ups and downs, but he does have good fantasy potential here, and he's priced really fairly, and he can also play at third base. He might be more popular at third base today, to be honest, than at this position even. So I do think he's a viable option, though. You could also look at Jose Abreu and and Pasquantino from Kansas City. So I think this is a pretty solid position today for first baseman, and there's lots of ways you can go, but I definitely like the expensive option the best. Looking at second base, Ketel Marte was very interesting yesterday, and he is very interesting today. The home run metric is a lot lower today than it was yesterday. And of course, he didn't hit a home run yesterday. He ended up 0 for 4, which was a disappointment. But and he's super expensive, so I do think that he's going to be somebody that people will probably fade a little bit more since he didn't do particularly well yesterday. That said, he's still playing in Colorado, and he's got a lot of upside. He's already hit 3 home runs this year, and this is a great situation for him to have some good potential. Not only that, but the Colorado pitching today is going to be absolutely awful, so actually worse than yesterday. Like I said, the home run upside is still there, but it's not quite as good. Another option that I like today is Gelof for Oakland. He definitely does have the home run pop today. He hit a home run yesterday, or I should say 2 days ago against Detroit, and he's actually been pretty solid to start the season. When he gets the opportunity, gets some hits, uh, uh, then he's had some really good upside. He did get walked a lot against Detroit, but I don't necessarily expect that today. But I do think he's going to have some viable potential in this one. He also has the best home run upside at this position when it comes to the top tier options. Then, if we look down the slate here a little bit more, we can find Jeff McNeil and Polanco for Minnesota, for the Mets, and for Seattle, respectively. I do think both these guys have some potential. And then another guy I do like a lot is Torres for the Yankees. Now he's got a great matchup here, and he has not hit a home run yet or anything, but he's got really good home run metrics for the slate, and so he's definitely worth a look to me here. And especially at this position, that's somewhat weak. And he's not too expensive, though. He's come up. He is $4,500 now, so he's not ideal. I wish he was a little bit cheaper, but he definitely has some potential today. Uh, Nolan Gorman for St. Louis, also interesting here at this position. Looking at our third baseman, we are going to start at the top here with Paredes for Tampa Bay. I do think Tampa Bay is going to be a popular stack today against Sandoval. Sandoval's been pretty rough, and Paredes has been a really solid play for the most part so far this season. He's had some really good games. I do like his potential here, though he does tend to strike out some. He definitely has good hitting metrics for this game, and I do think he'll get on base a couple times. And he's cheaper than some of the other options like Austin Riley, who I do like a lot today as well. I'm going to talk about him in this situation. He's been very boom or bust to start the season, but he definitely draws a good matchup metrics here, and so I do think he has a viable opportunity to have a solid game. I do think he'll be a low owned, so that should give him some upside as well. Looking at Bregman, he's a little bit cheaper, and he has not hit a home run yet this season. And I don't necessarily think he'll hit it today, but I do think he'll get on base a few times and still score some fantasy points. I wish he was a little bit cheaper, but he definitely draws that average potential here. Then we'll go down and look at Chris Morel for the Cubs. He's another guy that he looks like a really solid play today against Musgrove, though Musgrove is a good pitcher. I do think that if the Cubs get to him, then Morel will be one of the reasons why. He's hit the ball fairly well to start the season, and he does have some good home run upside in this game, so he's definitely worth a look. I also think Jake Berger can play at this position and is a great play against Rodon. He definitely carries some risk, but Rodon's the type of pitcher, that he's going to get some strikeouts, and Berger will likely strike out some here, but he definitely has that home run upside on the slate, so he's definitely interesting on it. Uh, Pretty much that's where I would stop here. Maybe Duran for Texas as a kind of a Hail Mary punt play would be interesting, but there's not too much else to like at this position today. Laying a shortstop, we do have some guys at the top that look really solid today in Trey Turner and in Bobby Witt Jr. Though they aren't must plays, they've been uh, some days they've been really good plays, but they do have tougher matchups today, though. Bobby Witt Jr. has been absolutely on a tear to start the year, though he had a rougher series against Chicago White Sox. The last 3 games, he only had 2 hits, but I do think he's going to bounce back here and have a really solid game against Houston. And Javier, while he has been good, he definitely carries some risk, as does Trey Turner, who has not hit a home run yet this season. The metrics are there for him, and the hitting upside here is absolutely incredible. I think he's probably the top option at this position, but he's going to be hard to roster with the price point. And I probably want to pay down at this position if I can, though there may not be a ton of value options at it. But I will look at a couple guys like Crawford for Seattle. He looks like an interesting play. He did manage to hit a home run against Toronto, which I did like him yesterday as well. And so he's definitely interesting in this slate again, though he definitely carries some risk. Then we'll look farther down to Rosario for Tampa Bay. Um, Now, Tampa Bay really struggled yesterday, which was a disappointment. But Rosario does have a lot of potential if he draws a start, and I do like his hitting metrics for this game. Not a whole lot of home run upside, but he's definitely somebody that's interesting. And then also Dansby Swanson and Jose Caballero would be interesting at this position, and even Alexander from Arizona would have some upside as well. But overall, this position is not super ideal, as the expensive guys are good, but they don't pop off the page like the other positions top tier guys do. Looking at outfielders, I do think that this is a position where you can at least get one guy that's super expensive, and I would say you want to look at Acuna. He's not a must play though, because he has really struggled so far this season to score a big fantasy point game. He's not hit a home run yet, which is somewhat of a disappointment. He does strike out sometimes too, which has also been tough. So uh, I do think he's due, and this is a great situation for him to potentially do it in. The home run metric is there, the hitting metric is there. It's just a matter of him putting it all together. He's definitely one of the highest rated players for this entire slate, but he is also one of the most expensive players, so he's going to be somewhat hard to roster as a result of that. Kyle Schwarber, he is jumping off the page again. He jumped off the page again yesterday, too. This matchup does give him a lot of home run upside, though he does tend to strike out a lot. He did not have his best game yesterday, but his home run metric is good. He's just a strikeout or boom or bust type of guy, but I do think he's a viable option. Corbin Carroll also gets some upside today, though he's not a real home run threat today as compared to some of the other guys. Even though he does, I mean, he is a home run threat today, but he's not as good as some of the other options. But he definitely has that potential, and he has some good stolen base metrics as well. He's hit the ball pretty average so far this year, but it looked like he has the opportunity to have a big game here against very weak pitching. Then we'll get into some value plays at this position. Ramirez for Tampa Bay. Uh, he's going to be interesting today. Tampa Bay really did struggle yesterday, and so I think that they will try to bounce back here. They've had a couple rough games, but I think that they're going to be able to bounce back in this one against weaker pitching for a change. Rooker for uh, Oakland, if he was to play, he would definitely be interesting because he had a really couple of solid games against Detroit, and he seems like he's seeing the ball pretty well. His metrics are really good. It is a tough matchup though, so to keep that in mind. Hot for Chicago Cubs looks like a very interesting play today. He's not hit a home run yet, but I've been watching for him to pop up on my radar, and today his home run metric is not particularly perfect, but it's still okay, and he definitely has that potential today, especially in a plus matchup here against San Diego, and I do like his upside at this one. I also like Suzuki, Blide, Ozuna. I'm going to talk about Ozuna here. Now, he's a little bit more expensive than a traditional value play, but at $4,600, he has been absolutely smashing the ball lately. He has hit 5 home runs already this season and 12 RBIs. He's hitting better than just about anybody. He's got a good matchup here against the Mets as well. His home run metric is really good today, and so he's definitely worth a look here. Chase McCormick for the Houston Astros is very interesting at $3,900. Brandon Nemo for the Mets, also interesting against Atlanta. And then Langford for Texas against Oakland. Castellanos for Philly. Ahmad Rosario for Tampa Bay. And then Brown for Oakland. Peterson for Arizona, and Wade for San Francisco, all in play on the slate. Lots of good options in the outfield. I think you can pay all over the place. And I think, fitting in your other position players today is definitely going to be the way to go because there's so many good options in the outfield as they all have a lot of home run potential too. So with that said, guys, this slate looks pretty fantastic. Hopefully we can figure out how to maneuver our roster. Right now, if I'm looking at pitchers, I'm leaning towards Glasnow and um, let's see here, and Rodon at this point, just because of their favorable matchups and situations. But that is subject to change at this point. But I do think that gives you some potential here, and you can find some value across the board. So I don't think it's a terrible way to go. With that said, guys, thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing.